welcome to the first in this second lot of working from home videos, and we're going to carry on straight from where we were in class. So what we've been looking at previously was quadratic graphs and how to sketch them. The last thing we looked at was doing it in root form. Remember, the roots were where it crossed the x-axis. Okay, what we're going to be looking at next is sketching quadratics in completed square form. So first off, we need to remember what this means. So completed square form is when we have something and its equation looks like this. Y equals x plus p all squared plus q. Or it could be y equals negative x plus p all squared plus q. Now, we've dealt with completing the square a couple of times. We've seen it when we were doing factorising, and we've looked at graphs before, sketches of quadratics, and then we've put them into this form. And so what we're going to do now is go the other way around. From this equation, sketch the graph, okay? So there's some key points we need to remember, okay? The first of which is whether there's a sign here in front of the equation or not, okay? And that tells you about the shape of the graph. So if there's no sign here or a positive sign, that tells us the graph is going to look like that, going to look like a smiley face. The turning points are the lowest part of it. If there's a negative sign here, that tells us the graph is going to be this shape. It'll look like a sad face, negative, and the turning point is the highest point on that graph, okay? We need to remember that, and then we follow some very similar steps to sketching in root form to sketch in completed the square form, okay? So our first step is to find the Y-intercept. So we find Y-intercept, and we do this exactly as we've done before. We find the Y-intercept by putting x equals 0. Okay, the next step is to find the turning point. Now, hopefully we can remember how we do that when we have something like this, okay? So when we were looking at things in root form, we had to do a bit of working out to find the turning point. We don't need to if it's in completed the square form, okay? That's why this form is good, because it gives us the turning point straight away. So remember, your turning point is going to be some coordinates, okay? The y part of your turning point, that is whatever number is on the end here, okay? So whatever number is here instead of a q, that is the y coordinate of your turning point, okay? And then whatever number is here with the x, so this p here, you put the opposite of that in, okay? So if you've put plus p here, that means your turning point is going to be negative p, okay? If you had negative p, your turning point would be a plus p there, okay? And that's how we get the turning point, okay? The bit on the end comes down to be your y, and the bit in the bracket, that comes down here to be your x coordinate. And that's all we need to sketch these graphs. That gives us where it's turning, and this gives us where it's going to cross the y-axis. We just need those 2 points and knowing that this graph is symmetrical to be able to do a sketch from that, okay? So let's look at an example of it, okay? So we're going to look at the graph, and I'm just going to draw a line on there, keep it separate. We're going to look at the graph. Y equals x plus 3 all squared, take away 4. So our first step is to find the y-intercept. So let's do that. Let's start by finding the y-intercept. And to do that, it says we're going to put x equals 0. So let's do that in here. We've got y equals, and instead of x, I'm going to write 0. Okay, y equals 0 plus 3 all squared, take away 4. And let's work that out. 0 plus 3 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So it gives me 9 take away 4. That gives me 5. Okay, so it's crossing the y-axis at 5. We could write that as a coordinate. It's 0, 5. We know x is 0 because that's what we put in here. Okay, so on our axes, let's quickly draw those actually. So we know our turning point is going to be on this y-axis. Sorry, let's just move that up a wee bit. So we know it's going to be on this line somewhere, and it's going to be at 5. Let's put 5 there. Okay, remember, your sketch doesn't need to be super accurate, it just needs to make sense. Okay, next bit then is to find the turning point. I'm just going to write TP because I'm lazy, and you can do exactly the same. So the turning point is going to be a set of coordinates. The y part of it, that's the q up here, that's just the number on the end. So the number on the end of ours is minus 4. So the y part of a turning point is minus 4. The number here, well, that's just the opposite of this number. So you remember up here, when it was plus p, it became minus p. So here it's plus 3, and it will become minus 3. I'm wishing I'd drawn a bit more on my graph if I'd thought ahead. Okay, so we know now the turning point is at negative 3, negative 4. So let's pop that on, because it'll be a bit easier for you because you'll have squared paper. Don't need to though, still just do a rough sketch. Negative 3 along, probably be about here, and then if we come 4 down, we're going to be around about here, and that's our turning point of negative 3, negative 4. That's all we need to draw this graph, to do a quick sketch of it, because the one other thing we know, that was a positive there was no negative, so that tells us it's going to be a little smiley face shape. So that means here I've got a little smiley face, okay? And it is symmetrical. So however I have to go through this turning point to get up to that line, I have to do the same on this side, okay? That is terrible, okay? You would still get all the marks of that in the exam though, okay? So that's something to feel positive about. If your graph is as bad as that, that still has everything you need for the marks, okay? It's got the y-intercept labelled, it's got the turning point labelled, it's the right way up, and it's in sort of the right place, okay? So let's look at another worked example for this, so we can see how it works in maybe a slightly trickier example. Okay, so our next worked example immediately looks a little bit different, okay? We don't have y equals, this time it's f of x equals. This doesn't change anything, okay? Remember, f of x is just another way of writing y, okay? We're saying that this value here changes depending what x is, and that's all that it normally reads, okay? Normally it says y changes with what x is, and instead of that, we're just writing f of x. So don't get scared by that. We'll go through it and you'll see it doesn't actually change anything we do. So I'm gonna just draw on some axes again when we're ready for them. Okay, first thing we want to look at, we'll look at what shape it's going to be. You'll see here there's a negative sign, and that's telling you straight away your graph's going to have a sad face, okay, because it's negative. Right, so let's look for the y-intercept, and just like before, to find the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. So let's rewrite this out now, but we'll put x equal to 0. If x is 0, we put a little 0 there, because that, oops. Because remember when we did function notation, when we did put this 0 in here, that means we're swapping an x for a 0 everywhere we see it. Okay, so we've got minus, and now we're going to have 0 take away 2 all squared plus 6. So let's go through this. 0 minus 2, well that's negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4, okay? But we still have this negative out the front. So now what we end up with is negative 4 plus 6, okay? So negative 4 plus 6 is equal to 2, okay? So f of 0 equals 2, okay? Looks a wee bit different from before, but this is exactly the same as saying y equals 2, okay? Which is saying on our y-axis, it's going to cross it at 2, and I'm going to put 2 there, okay? If you wanted to write this out as a coordinate, you could. It would just be 0, 2, because the x is 0, because that's what we popped in, and 2 is what we worked it out. Okay, next bit, even easier, we don't have to do any maths for this, is the turning point. So it's going to be a set of coordinates. The y part, that's just our number at the end, remember? So that just comes straight down, don't do anything to it. So it's going to be 6. Then the x part, that's the opposite of the number next to the x. So here, the number with the x is a negative 2. So we pop the opposite of that in there, which is positive 2. And that's our turning point. So then we put that on our graph. We'll go along about 2, round about here, up about 6, round about there. And that's the point 2, 6. Now, you've done all that work. You've got yourself a handful of marks. The last bit is for drawing on the graph properly. And I've seen quite a lot of people make mistakes here. And so what some people will do is they will go and do, I'm going to do it in a dotted line so it doesn't show up very well. They'll say, okay, this looks like a graph that would go like that, which you can sort of see, but I don't really want you to be able to see it because it's wrong, okay? That's not correct, because the shape of that graph is a smiley face. And remember, we're looking for a sad face, okay? This point here, that is where the graph turns, okay? So this little sad bit, that goes on that place, okay? Remember which one of these is your turning point, okay? 2, 6, that was your turning point, okay? And then if we keep it symmetrical, it's going to come down like that, and it's going to go like that. It's a bit better than my last one, okay? But still, everything you need there to get the marks, okay? So, exactly the same as before. The sign out the front told you the shape of the graph. To get the y-intercept, you pop in x equals 0, just work it all out. And then to get the turning point, end number comes straight down to be the y, inside number, change the sign, and that gives you the x. That's all you need to know to sketch these. Okay, hopefully that was understandable. Thanks for listening, and bye.